The Han River has carried kings, criminals, and bodies for centuries. On the night Park Jae-min buried his mother, it carried something else. 43 floors above the river, 300 armed men stood in silence. Yet none of them moved. At the center of the hall stood a pedestal wrapped in white silk. On it rested a small black urn trimmed in gold. Inside were the ashes of Park Jae-min's mother, the only person he had never been able to frighten. Then the doors at the back of the hall opened. A woman walked in. She did not hurry. She did not look around. She walked through 300 armed men as if they were furniture. She reached the pedestal. She picked up the urn. And before anyone understood what she was doing, she walked to the balcony and turned it upside down over the Han River. Ashes scattered into the wind. The room stopped breathing. Hundreds of armed men waited for the order. Every eye turned to Park Jae-min, the most feared man in South Korea. He did not move. He did not shout. He did not stop her. He only watched the ashes fall. Because in the half-second before the wind took them, Park Jae-min saw something inside the ashes. A fragment that should not have survived the fire. Something that should not have been there at all. And in that moment he understood something impossible. His mother had not died the way everyone believed. For 11 days, he had accepted her death without question. That was the part he could not forgive himself for. When Park was 23 and the newspapers first called him a crime boss, he came home furious. His mother had simply handed him a bowl of rice and told him to wash his hands before sitting down. She never used his title. Never asked about his work. To her, he was only her son. Men like Park do not mourn out loud. They become quiet. And when men like that become quiet, people die. The building had no name. No address in any public directory. No sign above the entrance. If you did not already know where it was, you were not meant to find it. Park Jae-min had chosen it for exactly that reason. He stood at the front of the hall with his hands behind his back. His suit cost more than most people in Seoul made in a month. His face revealed nothing. Park had spent 20 years learning the same lesson. The moment a powerful man shows emotion, someone tries to use it against him. Most of them had never met the woman whose ashes sat in the urn. Park's mother had insisted on living far away from his world. She lived in a small house in Mapo. She grew vegetables, watched television dramas. And once a week, on Sunday afternoons, her son came to visit. She had died 11 days earlier. Heart failure. That was the official explanation. Park had accepted it. For 11 days. At the back of the hall, Kang Dae-ho leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. Dae-ho was the kind of man who looked less like a bodyguard and more like a consequence. He had not taken his eyes off the entrance since the service began. He did not know why. He only knew something felt wrong. Then the doors opened. And suddenly he understood. Someone had just walked into the room who absolutely should not have been there. No one stopped her at the entrance. That was the first thing Kang Dae-ho could not explain. 4 men were guarding the doors. Experienced men. Men who had turned away politicians and generals without hesitation. Yet the woman walked past them as if the doors had opened just for her. She was tall. Late 20s. Dark skin. Her hair pulled neatly back. No jewelry except small gold studs. She carried nothing. No bag. No phone. No weapon. And she was not afraid. Daeho knew fear when he saw it. This woman had none. She walked down the center aisle slowly. Calm. Deliberate. Like someone who had already accepted the consequences of what she was about to do. Several men turned. Hands moved toward hidden weapons. Daeho pushed off the wall. He moved quickly for a man his size. By the time she reached the pedestal, he was already closing the distance. The candlelight illuminated her face. She looked down at the urn. And something in her expression changed. Not grief. Recognition. She reached out. Picked up the urn. The room went completely silent. Daeho's hand closed around the grip of his pistol. The sound in the room was not a gasp. It was quieter than that. No one moved. Not even Kang Daeho. His hand remained on his weapon. But instinct told him to wait. His eyes moved to Park Jae-min. Every eye in the room did the same. Park Jae-min had not turned around. But he knew. Daeho had worked beside Park for 17 years. He recognized the difference between calm and calculation. This was calculation. The woman lifted the urn. It was heavier than she expected. She adjusted her grip. One of the junior captains stepped forward. Park Jae-min raised one finger. The captain froze. The woman turned toward the balcony. The balcony doors opened. Cold air rushed into the hall. She stepped outside. 43 floors above the Han River. Then she turned the urn upside down. Ashes scattered into the wind. The entire room stopped breathing. The balcony doors were locked. Daeho knew because he had checked them himself that morning. He always checked exits personally. Security was not procedure for him. It was reflex. The woman reached the doors. Pressed the handle. They opened. Daeho stared. Someone must have opened them after his security check. He would think about that detail later. For a long time. Cold night air rushed into the hall. The candles bent in the wind. She set the empty urn carefully on the railing. Not thrown. Placed. Almost gently. Then she turned back toward the room. 300 men stared at her. She looked only at Park Jae-min. And Park Jae-min was staring at the air where the ashes had been. His eyes focused. Sharp. Something had changed. Just slightly. Because in the instant before the ashes vanished, Park had seen something inside them. And for a moment, he was not looking at evidence. He was looking at what was left of her. No one moved for 7 seconds. Kang Daeho counted them. 7 seconds passed. No one moved. At 7, a captain finally spoke. Boss. One word. Question. Permission. Warning. Park Jae-min did not answer. He was still looking at the empty railing. Still replaying the image in his mind. The ashes. The color. The fragment he thought he saw. And the one thing he had not seen 11 days ago. The woman stood in the doorway. Waiting. Not afraid. Just watching him. Daeho stepped beside her. 2 more men closed in from the other side. Containing the situation. Waiting for the order. Across the room, Chairman Choi Sung-kyu stood with both hands resting on his cane. He watched Park carefully. His face revealed nothing. Then something small happened. So small most people missed it. The chairman looked at the woman. Then back at Park. And slowly, he lowered his eyes to the floor. Park Jae-min walked to the balcony. The crowd opened for him instantly. Not just from fear. From habit. Men moved when Park moved. He stopped at the railing and picked up the empty urn. He turned it slowly in his hands. The inside. The gilded rim. The base. The maker's seal pressed into the lacquer underneath. He ran his thumb across it once, then set it down. The inside felt wrong. Not empty. Altered. Only then did he look at the woman. Up close, she looked younger than she had from across the hall. Late 20s. Calm eyes. Steady breathing. No panic. No attempt to explain herself. Only waiting. "Your name," Park said. His voice was quiet. It was always quiet. Men who needed volume to command a room had already lost control of it. "Amara Okoye," she said. "I was your mother's caregiver for the last 4 months of her life." Something flickered across Park's face. Recognition. Gone almost immediately. "I know who you are," he said. He studied her for a second longer than necessary. Not as a caregiver. Not as a stranger. As a variable he had missed. That did not happen. Not in his world. "Stay," he said. Behind him, Kang Dae-ho felt something cold settle in his stomach. The boss knew her. He had known her before tonight. And he had told no one. Park looked once more at the air above the river where the ashes had disappeared. Then he gave the order no one in that room expected. "Clear the hall." Dae-ho blinked. "Boss?" "Everyone," Park said. "Except her." No one questioned it. But more than one man noticed the change. He wasn't just keeping her. He was choosing her. The hall emptied in 4 minutes. 300 men left without argument. Captains first. Then lieutenants. Then the outer ranks. Even the attendants and caterers disappeared. Kang Dae-ho was the last man at the door. He stopped. "I'll be outside," he said. "You'll be downstairs," Park replied. Dae-ho did not like that answer. He looked once at Amara, measuring her, warning her without words. Then he left. The doors shut behind him. Now the hall felt enormous. Too quiet. Park stood with his back to Amara, facing the river. "You could have come to me," he said. "You had 11 days. "I needed proof," Amara said. "And I needed you to see it before anyone could hide it." "The ashes." "Yes." Park turned to face her. "What did you find?" Amara took a breath. Amara had worked in hospice before becoming a private caregiver. She had attended enough cremations to know what human cremains normally looked like. "The color was wrong," she said. "Human cremains are usually pale. Coarse. What was in that urn was finer. Darker. Mixed with something." Park's eyes narrowed. Mixed with what? Park already knew the answer would not be simple. But he asked anyway. Amara held his gaze. "What happens to a body between the hospital and the cremation furnace?" Without another word, Park walked into a side room off the main hall. Amara followed. The room was simple. Folding tables. Stacked chairs. A utility sink. Overhead fluorescent light. Nothing ceremonial. Nothing soft. Park placed the urn on the table and opened it. A thin layer of residue still clung to the inside. Gray dust. Uneven. Patchy. Park leaned closer. He was not a forensic technician. He did not need to be. He had stood this close to her only once in the last year. And even then, he had left early. He had seen enough cremated remains to know this was wrong. And he knew it before anyone told him why. Some of it looked normal. Pale. Grainy. Human. Some of it did not. The rest was finer. Darker. Almost powder-like. As if two different substances had been poured together and only partly mixed. Park's phone buzzed. He read the message. Then slowly turned the screen toward Amara. Before a body is cremated, he said, the hospital has to release it. Amara nodded. And someone has to certify that the death was natural. A name appeared in the verification field. Lee Min-suk. Amara frowned. Who is that? Hospital forensic technician, Park said. What does he verify? That the body shows no signs of foul play before cremation. The room went still. Park looked back at the urn. If my mother was poisoned, he said, then Lee Min-suk was the last person who had a chance to see it. He picked up the phone again. Read the next line. His expression hardened. Lee Min-suk hasn't reported to the hospital in 4 days. Another file appeared on Park's phone. Transfer record. Body collection log. The name listed under transport authorization made Amara look up. Kang Dae-ho. She said nothing. Park set the phone down very carefully. Too carefully. Both hands rested on the table. His eyes stayed on the screen. Dae-ho had been with him since he was 26. He had taken a knife meant for Park's throat in a Gangnam parking structure in 2009. Guarded doors. Missed his own family funerals when Park needed him elsewhere. Trust, in Park's world, was not emotion. It was arithmetic. Years of proof. Dae-ho's record had no deficit. Which meant one of two things was true. Either the record on the screen had an explanation. Or Park had trusted the wrong man for 17 years. And if that was true, then everything he believed about loyalty was wrong. The transfer record had one problem. It still didn't make sense. And it had Dae-ho's name on it. Amara studied the file again. The body was logged for transfer, she said. But that doesn't mean it went straight to cremation. Park looked up. What do you mean? The hospital still had to clear it first, Amara said. Someone had to sign off that the death looked natural. She pointed to the screen again. The same name appeared in the verification field. Lee Min-suk. The technician, Amara said quietly. He's the one who cleared your mother's body. Park stared at the name for a long moment. Then he made his choice. Find him. The authorization had been entered from a hospital terminal after Dae-ho had already left the building. At 11:47 that night, Dr. Yoon Tae-sik locked his clinic in See a Demon and left the lights off. He sat alone in the dark. He had already heard what happened at the funeral. News like that moved fast around men who lived close to dangerous people. Through whispers. Cancelled meetings. Phones that suddenly stopped ringing. On his laptop screen was a hospital report. At the bottom sat a verification signature. Lee Min-suk. 3 days earlier, Lee had come to Yoon's office unannounced. Nervous. Sweating. holding a toxicology printout he was never supposed to have. Dr. Yoon, Lee had said, this patient didn't die naturally. Yoon had looked at the file and immediately recognized the name. Park Sun-hee. Park Jae-min's mother. Yoon closed the laptop. His phone buzzed. He already knew who was calling. He looked at the screen but did not answer. The phone buzzed again. This time he picked up. You watched the news, the voice said. Not a question. I don't know what you mean, Yoon said. Then the voice said, the woman threw the ashes into the river. Which means she noticed. Which means he knows something is wrong. And when Park Jae-min knew something was wrong, people disappeared. Yoon's hand tightened around the phone. What do you want me to do? Nothing yet, the voice said. But clean your records. Tonight. All of them. The line went dead. Yoon sat motionless for 3 seconds. Then he opened a drawer, took out a portable hard drive, and started deciding what had to disappear first. Park Jae-min did not sleep. For 2 hours he sat in the back of his car outside the funeral building, engine running, city lights sliding across the windows. He kept seeing the same image. The ashes in the wind. Not white. Gray. Wrong. At 1 a.m. he called Professor Shin, a forensic consultant who had worked quietly for the syndicate for 9 years. Shin asked one question. Is there any residue left in the urn? Yes. Then I can give you something by morning. At 6:42, Park's phone rang. Shin got straight to the point. The residue contains calcium phosphate consistent with human cremains, he said. But there's something else in it. Park stayed silent. Not ash, Shin added. Park's voice was flat. What is it? It looks biological, Shin said. Possibly a bone fragment that was burned separately. Park felt the cold settle deeper into the car. What kind of biological? I can't confirm yet, Shin said. But it should not be inside a cremation urn. Then the part that mattered most. It is too intact to have survived the cremation process, Shin said. Which means it was probably added afterward. Park stared through the windshield. He had spent 11 days believing she died quietly. Now he understood she had not died alone. Someone had tampered with his mother's ashes after cremation. And whatever had been added to them had once been part of another human body. For 11 years, Park visited his mother every Sunday without missing one. On Sundays, he drove himself. No driver. No escort. No daeho. Just a road, a house in Mapo, and a version of his life that almost felt normal. His mother always made the same meal. Doenjang jjigae. Rice. Homemade kimchi. She never asked about his work. He never told her. That silence had been her gift to him. And he had taken it without ever asking what it cost her. A place where he could sit at a kitchen table without being the man the rest of Seoul feared. In her final months, she asked for a caregiver. Someone with no connection to his world. Someone clean. He found Amara through a private agency and approved her personally. His mother liked her immediately. She sees me, she told him one Sunday. Not you. Me. Now Park stared at the report on his phone. Lee Min-suk. Forensic technician. Verification officer. And suddenly he remembered the last Sunday he saw his mother alive. She had seemed uneasy. Not sick. Worried. Twice she had almost said something. Twice she stopped. Because she had already decided something he had not. He had not pushed. He told himself she was tired. Now he knew better. A lieutenant returned from a phone call. The hospital says Lee Min-suk hasn't been at work all week, he said. Park looked up. Why? They don't know. The lieutenant hesitated. His apartment is empty. Amara looked at the urn. If he verified the body, she said, then he was the last person to see your mother before cremation. Park looked down at the gray residue inside the urn. And now he's gone. 4 months earlier, Park's mother had asked Amara to close the bedroom door. Amara did. When she sat back down, Mrs. Park was looking out at the garden. The persimmon tree was nearly bare. The neighbor's dog slept against the wall outside. I want to tell you something, Mrs. Park said. Amara set down her book. Not as your patient, the old woman said. As a woman who needs a witness. Then she told Amara the truth. She knew what parts of her son's empire had become. She knew where some of the money went. And in the last months of her life, she had started moving against it. Quietly. Carefully. She had redirected things. Spoken to people. Created exits. She had been fixing what he built. Quietly. Without asking him to change. Someone had noticed. There was a young technician at the hospital last week, she said. He asked me questions the doctors never asked. Then she said something worse. Her medication had been changed. By a doctor she never requested. Mrs. Park took Amara's hand. If something happens to me that feels wrong, she said, you make my son see it. Whatever it costs you. Promise me. Amara looked at her. Then nodded. I promise. That promise was why she stood in a room full of killers 11 days after Mrs. Park's death. And threw the ashes into the Han River. Amara had not come to the funeral empty-handed. After Mrs. Park's death, she started with the medication. The primary prescriptions were normal. Cardiac treatment. Consistent. Documented by Dr. Huang, the physician who had treated Mrs. Park for 6 years. But in the final 6 weeks of her life, another prescription appeared. A mild sedative. Officially for sleep problems. That bothered Amara immediately. Mrs. Park had not struggled to sleep. Amara had been there every night. No insomnia. No complaints. No reason for sedation. Which meant someone had created a medical excuse that did not match reality. That was when Amara stopped asking whether Mrs. Park had been failed. And started asking who had done it on purpose. 2 days after the funeral, Amara went to the clinic listed on the prescription. It was gone. Sign removed. Windows dark. Equipment cleared out overnight. A neighboring shop owner said the doctor had disappeared the night after Mrs. Park died. Amara photographed the empty storefront. Then the prescription label. Then one more detail. The authorizing registration number. She checked it against the National Medical Registry. It did not belong to a doctor. It belonged to a hospital technician. Lee Min-suk. Amara checked again. Same result. Someone had used a technician's registration number to authorize medication for Park's mother. And that same technician had later cleared her body for cremation. By the next morning, everyone in the organization knew something had gone wrong. Not officially. Park had said nothing. He had called no meeting. Issued no statement. explained nothing. That silence was enough. Men who had spent years serving Park knew how to read his moods. This one terrified them. Because anger could be managed. Park's silence could not. In a parking structure in Yeongdeungpo, a lieutenant named Beck took a call from a number he had never saved. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, he sat in his car without moving. Across the city, in a hotel lobby in Yeonggu, Kang Dae-ho stood with his hands in his coat pockets and replayed the funeral again and again. The urn. The ashes. His own name on the transfer record. And one detail that bothered him more than all the others. Park had sent him out of the room. In 17 years, that had never happened. Not once. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. A message appeared. Lee Min-suk. Dae-ho stared at the screen. Then another message arrived. Find him before Park does. Dae-ho's jaw tightened. That message could mean only one of two things. Someone was trying to warn him. Or someone wanted him afraid. At 8:43 that morning, Professor Shin called with a second finding. The fragment is human, he said. Park said nothing. But it does not belong to your mother. Then Park asked, how can you tell? The heat damage is different, Shin said. It was burned somewhere else and added later. Park stood at the window of his apartment, staring out over a city that had no idea anything had changed beneath it. Can you estimate time of death? Not precisely, Shin said. But the oxidation pattern suggests the person died within 30 days of the funeral. Possibly less. Park ended the call. Then he asked himself the only question that mattered. Who had access to a recent body, access to the cremation facility in Yunpyeong, and a reason to contaminate his mother's ashes? One answer kept returning. Not because it made sense. Because he did not want it to. He called a contact inside the National Cremation Registry. 20 minutes later, she called back. There was one unregistered cremation, she said. No name. No family listed. The authorization used a registration number that doesn't match any licensed physician. Park closed his eyes. It was the same false registration number Amara had found on the prescription. The same number tied to Lee Min-suk. The same technician who had cleared his mother's body. Park opened the hospital file again. Lee Min-suk. Forensic technician. Verification officer. Then he gave the order. Find him. A lieutenant made the call. 3 minutes later he returned. His face had changed. Sir, the hospital says Lee Min-suk hasn't reported to work in 11 days. Amara felt the cold before she even spoke. Since before the funeral. Park found the next clue in a report he had almost ignored. 6 weeks before his mother's death, a syndicate accountant named Oh Sung-jin had failed to appear for work. He never came back. No follow-up had been done. That alone was strange. Inside Park's organization, missing people were never routine. Park pulled Oh's personnel file and read it line by line. 8 weeks before disappearing, Oh had submitted a formal internal request for access to financial records outside his department. The request had been denied. Park looked at the authorization signature. Chairman Choi Sung-kyu. Park read it again. Then a third time. Something about the denial felt wrong. Too fast. Too clean. As if the answer had been prepared before the question was even asked. He thought back to the funeral. Choi standing at the rear of the room. watching everything. Then lowering his eyes when Amara threw the ashes into the river. At the time it looked like restraint. Now it looked like recognition. Oh Sung-jin had seen something in those records. Something serious enough to get him erased. And serious enough that his mother had died trying to move it out of the dark. And Chairman Choi had known about it before anyone else. Amara had held back one final piece. Not to deceive Park. To time it. When Park called her at noon and said the name Oh Sung-jin, she knew he was ready. She told him to meet her by the river. They sat in the back of a car facing the Han. Gray water. Winter light. No driver in earshot. Amara opened a folder. Inside were 4 photographs. Each one taken secretly in Mrs. Park's house during the final 2 weeks of her life. The first was a handwritten note. Oh Sung-jin's name. A date. A meeting place in Mapo. 3 weeks before he disappeared. The second was a partial financial record. Transfers. Account numbers. Amounts moved in careful increments. The third was a photograph of 2 men sitting together in a restaurant. One was Oh Sung-jin. The other was Chairman Choi Sung-kyu. Park stared at the image. Then Amara handed him the 4th document. An unsigned death certificate. His mother's name was already on it. The date had been entered 11 days before she died. Park looked at the paper. Then looked at it again. Someone had prepared for his mother's death before her heart ever stopped. Amara did not explain it. She let him sit with what it meant. Park got out of the car and walked to the river. He gripped the railing with both hands and looked down at the water. Amara stayed where she was. This was not the moment to speak. The photograph had settled one truth. Chairman Choi had known Oh Sung-jin before the accountant ever filed his access request. That meant the denial was not administrative. It was containment. The death certificate settled another. His mother's death had been planned in advance. Organized. Prepared on paper before it happened in reality. Park stood there for 11 minutes. When he came back to the car, his voice was as quiet as ever. How long? Amara looked at him. How long did she know someone was coming for her? Amara chose her words carefully. Long enough to prepare, she said. And long enough to make sure you would eventually understand. Park stared ahead. She used her final months to protect me. Amara did not let him hide inside that version of the truth. She used them to protect people you never saw, she said. That is the difference. Park said nothing. But now he understood what came next. He was going to call Choi. At 4 that afternoon, Park called a meeting of his inner circle. Not the captains. Not the wider organization. Just the people closest to him. Kang Dae-ho. 3 senior lieutenants. His legal advisor. And Chairman Choi Sung-kyu. They gathered in a windowless room in Jeonnyo. 1 table. 7 chairs. No devices. No witnesses. Park sat at the head. He offered nothing. No food. No drink. No opening remarks. He placed 3 items on the table. The financial document. The restaurant photograph. The unsigned death certificate. Then he let the silence work. Because silence was the only thing in the room more dangerous than a weapon. Everyone at the table understood these documents meant only one thing. Someone inside the inner circle had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Daeho's jaw tightened. The legal advisor went pale. But Chairman Choi did not react. He looked at the documents, folded his hands, then raised his eyes to Park. "How much does she know?" That was all he said. No denial. No outrage. No confusion. Just assessment. The room changed instantly. Every man at the table understood what that sentence meant. Park held Choi's gaze. "Everything," he said. Choi nodded once. Calm. Measured. Almost accepting. "Then we have a problem," Choi said. Park's answer came without delay. "No," he said. "You do." Then Park asked the name that mattered most. "Oh Sung-jin." Chairman Choi reached into his jacket. Every man in the room moved. Daeho rose halfway from his chair. The two lieutenants near the door shifted forward. Even the legal advisor leaned back on instinct. But Choi did not draw a weapon. He removed a folded piece of paper and placed it on the table. Then he pushed it toward Park. Park read it in silence. 2 handwritten pages. When he finished, he looked up. "Where did you get this?" "Your mother gave it to me," Choi said. 3 weeks before she died. No one in the room spoke. Choi continued. "She came to me because she wanted my support. She intended to dismantle parts of the organization. She believed I would help her. And instead you had her killed," Daeho said. Choi turned his head slightly. "I had the accountant killed," he said. "Your mother died of heart failure." No one at the table believed that sentence. Not even Choi. "You accelerated it," Park said. Choi did not deny that. "The medication was adjusted," he said, "to manage her intentions. Like she had been a problem to solve." Park repeated the words back to him. Now even the air in the room felt dangerous. Choi knew he was exposed. So he spent the only currency he had left. "There is a second letter," he said. "In a place only I know. Addressed to the prosecutors. It contains everything. If I do not make a call by midnight, it goes out automatically." Park looked at him. "It sends automatically," he said. Choi gave the smallest nod. "That," he said, "is my leverage." Park stood up. He did not reach for a weapon. He did not raise his voice. He walked to the far wall, stopped, and turned back. "Oh Sung-jin," he said. "Tell me." For the first time, Choi's composure shifted. "Barely. But enough." "Oh, found the transfers," Choi said. 18 months of them. Your mother had been moving money across multiple accounts." "Moving it where?" "Out," Choi said. "Outside the organization's visibility." "For what?" Choi looked at Park. "For exits." The room went silent. "Exits for who?" "Women," Choi said. "Staff. People your mother believed deserved a way out before the organization consumed the rest of their lives." Park said nothing. But now he saw her differently. Not as a mother waiting quietly to die. As a woman who had been braver than he was. His mother had not been sitting quietly in Maple waiting to die. She had been building doors. Invisible ones. One transfer at a time. One person at a time. One lie at a time. "Oh, found the transfers," Park said. "And he brought them to you." He did not understand what he was looking at, Choi said. He thought it might be an accounting error. Or a threat? And you decided it was a threat? Choi did not answer. Park's next question cut deeper. And then you had him cremated in one of our own facilities and put part of him in my mother's urn. Still Choi said nothing. So Park asked the only thing left. Why the ashes? Choi lowered his eyes to his folded hands. A message, he said. For anyone who might try to continue what she started. Not an accident. Not a mistake. A warning. Park picked up the letter again after the meeting broke. This time he read it slowly. His mother had written it as contingency, not confession. If Choi was reading it, she had failed to survive long enough to finish what she started. The letter confirmed what Park was only now beginning to understand. She had spent months preparing for the possibility of her own death. She had mapped the operations she wanted destroyed. She had documented names, accounts, routes, safe houses. And she had divided the evidence. One set where Choi could find it. Another where only Park would think to look. That second set was the real weapon. The real leverage. The real plan. Park lowered the letter. For the first time since the funeral, he understood something clearly. His mother had not left him a memory. She had left him a choice. And for the first time in his life, power could not make that choice easier. Later, Park sat with Amara in his mother's garden. The persimmon tree stood bare. The neighbor's dog slept against the wall. The loose stone remained where it had always been. The world looked unchanged. It was not. There were two paths left. For the first time, Park Jae-min did not know which version of himself she had believed in. The one he had become. Or the one she had been waiting for. On one path, Park protected the organization. He silenced Choi quietly. Buried the records. Closed every loose end. His mother's death became another secret swallowed by the same machine that caused it. On the other path, he did what she had spent her final months trying to force him to see. He cut away the parts of the empire she could not live with. He exposed enough to break the men responsible. And he accepted that the inheritance his father built was not worth protecting whole. Park looked at the garden. Then at the stone. Then at Amara. She did not tell him what to do. That made it harder. For years, he had believed control was strength. Now he understood it had only ever been distance. Strength was choosing what deserved to survive. And what did not. Before midnight, Park made 2 calls. The first was to Kang Dae-ho. He told him where Chairman Choi would be sleeping. He told him to make sure Choi made the call that stopped the prosecutor's letter from being sent. Then he told him something else. Make sure Choi understands that his protection is over. Completely. Dae-ho listened. Then he asked, and after? Park answered. Dae-ho went quiet for a moment. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. Understood. The second call was to Prosecutor Yoon Yeon-hee. She had spent 6 years trying to build a clean case against Park's organization. Park gave her what she needed. Not everything. Enough. He named the operations his mother had marked. The routes. The accounts. The men attached to them. But he set one boundary clearly. The 17 women his mother had moved to safety were not to be dragged back into the machine. Young wrote everything down. The next morning, Park went to his mother's house with Amara. The second set of records was exactly where the letter implied it would be. In a waterproof case beneath a loose stone near the persimmon tree. Hidden in plain sight. His mother's favorite kind of strategy. Park lifted the stone. Removed the case. And handed it to Amara. 3 weeks later, Chairman Choi Sun-kyu was arrested at his home in Gangnam. Dr. Yoon Tae-sik was arrested the same morning. The clinic records he tried to destroy had survived on a backup server he never knew existed. The syndicate did not collapse. Organizations like Park's do not collapse from one betrayal. They contract. They adapt. They amputate damaged parts and go on living. But the center had changed. The operations Park's mother marked were dismantled. Quietly. Methodically. Completely. 17 women stayed in 17 cities. No one came for them. The following Sunday, Park drove alone to his mother's house. No driver. No escort. No Daeho. He let himself in. Made doenjang jjigae in her kitchen. He got it wrong the first time. She would have corrected him without saying he was wrong. He fixed it. Then ate alone at the table, looking out at the garden. The persimmon tree was bare. The neighbor's dog came to the wall and sat waiting. Park carried out a piece of fish and fed it to him. Then he sat on the low stone wall in the cold and looked at the place where the case had been hidden. His mother had spent her final months doing what he never had. Seeing clearly. Moving quietly. Protecting people he had never even thought to protect. By the time he left, the light was almost gone. He locked the door behind him and drove home along the Han River. Dark. Wide. Indifferent. Still carrying whatever the city threw into it. He sat in the car a while longer. Engine running. City lights moving across the windshield. Amara Okoye. He said the name once. Like fixing it in place. Then his phone buzzed. A message. No number. No name. Just 4 words. The message said, "You trusted the wrong man." Park didn't look at the river. For a moment, he didn't look at anything. He just sat there. Engine running. City lights sliding across the glass. And he did the math again. 17 years. No mistakes. Except one. Then he looked at Daeho. And for the first time in 17 years, he wasn't sure what he was looking at.